Welcome to Shaping the NYC Skyline, the podcast that explores the stories behind the buildings that shape our city. I'm your host, David Shamshovich, and I'm here with my co-host,
Brenda Slukowski. Hey, David. Hey, Camila.
Hi,
and
guys.
hello, Skyliners.
hello to the million Skyliners plus. I actually don't know if that number is accurate or not.
You know who was a guest today?
Our friend, Adam Leitman Bailey.
Neil Patrick Harris, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Adam Leitman Bailey.
He has such a big personality, I think he needs each and one of those names.
Even internally, I would never refer to him as Adam or Mr. Bailey. It's always Adam Leitman Bailey.
He listens to the podcast, and he was so responsive in coming on and just sharing his story. He has a lot of years of experience. He graduated law school in 95, started his firm in 2000. So he has 23 years of that experience.
He's a self-made man.
He started from nothing and he grew it.
He was a fresh perspective on the real estate development industry in New York City, considering we've previously talked to developers and our attorneys, and we've spoken to architects. It's just a different perspective to hear like the litigation aspect rather than the transactional.
Yeah, the problems that arise in real estate transactions in New York and development in New York, he's at the forefront. Getting that perspective is good because these people are on the front lines. They see the trends. They see what's happening.
Another thing that was very interesting to hear about is his role in creating precedent in New York City litigation and how he is shaping the New York City skyline.
I was waiting for you to say
I could
that.
not find a place to put it in the actual episode, so it's just going in the intro.
Yeah, Brenda's obsession with saying the name of the podcast has gone too far. And Brenda, I didn't want to spoil the surprise, but this is actually an intervention. I love the mentions of the podcast, and I enjoy our running shtick throughout.
Me too.
I thought it was very interesting that he has a different perspective because he has represented similar cases in both sides, which is rare to find nowadays.
True. Yeah.
Usually either you're representing a tenant or a landlord, but he has done both.
Yeah.
And that gives him a total different perspective.
The injustice is what brought him into this business. It's like I feel like I have to make everything about like a superhero story. But his origins were, he got this upbringing where he wasn't very financially set with his parents, who had lost their jobs. He moved around a little bit, and he was bullied. And he's come out of that shell, and now he's trying to fight for the things that he believes in and the justice that he believes in. And when our Skyliners listen to the interview, they'll see that he picks his cases and based on what he thinks is just. He had a lot to talk about. We could have kept him here for 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
He's been so excited about being on the podcast. He had a lot to share. I'm hoping some of this will be new. He definitely has a lot of material out there.
He has a children's book.
He has a children's book.
You cannot avoid his name in the real estate industry.
Yeah. And hopefully we brought a little bit of a different perspective. You'll have a spin on what you think about him, which I said is really one of the big things I want to do in this podcast is to dissect the real estate development industry, which includes lawyers, architects, developers, and flip it on its head so people understand who these people really are, in addition to just informing our Skyliners about what's happening. Not because I'm telling you, not because you read it in The Real Deal or the Commercial Observer. You're getting it from the people who are there and who see it, the attorneys who see it, the architects who see it, with what's going on in the city and their perspective.
Yeah.
And you guys be the judge. So we think this episode's going to be great. You're going to love it.
Skyliners, give us some feedback, rate, review, comment.
Please, we'd really love to hear that. And if you want to contact us, you can reach us.
You don't have to give our info because that'll be at the end.
Sure. All right. Well, thanks, Debbie Downer.
Sorry. Jeez. My name's Brenda.
Sorry, Brenda Downer.
There you go. Much better.
Doesn't feel like there's not a good ring to that, I don't feel.
Exactly.
Brenda
Brenda's
Downer.
If we repeat it enough, it might work.
No.
Brenda Downer. No, I feel like Candyman's going to come jumping out of the mirror.
Candyman.
Wrong Candyman.
I think that, I know,
There
that's a
she
Christina Aguilera song.
She was singing.
Yeah, she wants to sing.
Well, Skyliners, I think you're really going to enjoy this interview with Adam Leitman Bailey.
Take it to the next level.
Hey, Skyliners, how are you?
Are you guys good?
Yeah.
Everybody's out there.
Everything is
listening,
great. How are you guys?
enjoying New York City.
Yeah.
Maybe the skyline of it all.
It's another beautiful day where, it's not an ideal office that we're at. It's a beautiful office.
We're at our office.
It's not on the river. It's not fancy, but it's good for us. It's modest.
Right.
And
keeps us humble.
It does keep us humble. And we have another humble guest. This man really needs no introduction.
But here comes the introduction.
Yeah, but here comes the introduction. He's the owner of the largest law firm owned by a single individual and the fourth largest real estate firm in New York State. In 2020, he was selected as Who's Who Legal Global Leaders in Real Estate. And in 2021 and 2022, Chambers and Partners ranked him as New York's top real estate litigators. He's been described as a zealous advocate, one of the most successful and prominent real estate attorneys in New York, with tenacity in the face of adversity, astute judgment, and strategic litigation skills in high-profile cases, and whose advocacy has even served to transform New York's real estate landscape. One judge even called him the best trial lawyer in his 9 years as a judge in New York City. He's also the author of a children's book called Home, which is about the importance of family over all else, and a book called Finding the Uncommon Deal. A top New York lawyer explains how to buy a home for the lowest possible price. Mr. Adam Leitman Bailey.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Adam
you so
Leitman
much.
Bailey, 3 names, like Neil Patrick Harris, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Adam Leitman Bailey.
Right.
We so appreciate the enthusiasm and what a class act you are, because the business that you're in is one that is fierce, competitive, and extremely adversarial. And that's not who you are as a human being, although that is who you are as an attorney. You had very humble beginnings, as I did, and some of the other people sitting at the table too. You were born in Queens, eventually made your way to LA and New Jersey, and you had an upbringing that I think brought out what you became. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Well, it has to do with our firm today. We're almost 60 people, almost 30 attorneys. It's very important to me to hire people like myself, because I feel like that if you grew up without means, you're going to have this drive. And there's nothing better than having a drive to succeed, to help you be successful. I've never been interested in money. I've always been interested in success. I don't understand where I came from with the formula, but having a horrible childhood did wonders for me in working these incredible hours when everybody else is having fun, and just killing myself where I have to win every case and I don't believe in losing. I mean, that has to come from the horrible childhood.
The distinction of money versus success is a distinction that I appreciate. It's a good one.
Right.
I like the origin story. You come from humble beginnings, and that drove you to succeed and to really be hungry. And that's the kind of people you look for, people that fit within that model and do exactly that. And they're going to succeed too.
I was born Adam Scott Leitman. At 5 years old, my parents got divorced, and my mom somehow won custody. My father had this kind of famous attorney who later represented Howard Stern, and didn't do well in Supton Boulevard in Queens. And my mom met this new man who we didn't quite hit it off too well. And they took us to California because they both lost their jobs as teachers at the time. So 2 unemployed teachers heading to California. My father is an unemployed teacher staying in Bayside, Queens. And we head to California for 9 years, came back to New Jersey at 13. I wrote in an article, the only thing worse than moving to California at 5 is moving to New Jersey at 13. I mean, you want to get bullied, be a California dude liking the Go-Go's, and they like Leonard Skinner and Metallica in New Jersey, and it just doesn't go very well.
Didn't Ralph Macchio leave New Jersey to go to California to become the Karate Kid?
He left New Jersey. I think he was around 13, 14, or heading into high school. And he also, I was in Canoga Park, California, in the Valley. He also went from, I think he was Brooklyn, that kind of area. And then he went from there to California, and also the Valley. He was a few miles away from where I grew up in California.
So you basically had the opposite side, right?
Yeah.
Except you went to New Jersey and became who you are now. Do you do karate?
Well, no, we both traveled to California. I just traveled to California when I was younger. He came after me.
Got it. I'm glad that you knew the reference. I mean, Karate Kid was a big influence on my
It's one of the greatest movies. Yeah.
I hope you watch Cobra Kai. If you don't,
no, I haven't. I get very limited TV time when you're working this much. But I would love my kids to get into it, but it has curse words. They're 7 and 8 years old. But
give it some time.
I did really, really enjoy the Karate Kid. One of my favorite movies growing up for obvious reasons. The kid has to leave New Jersey to go to California. So
it spoke very closely to you.
Yeah, so it hits the heart. And then he gets bullied, and bullying was something I just got used to.
Well, it's an interesting thing. A lot of the things that I've read about you and things I've talked to you about is you really do not like injustice. I'm one of those people too.
I can't stand injustice,
and that really comes
from the bullying. And even after I started lifting weights when my sophomore year of high school. And then all of a sudden, and I became a top athlete, top runner. And all of a sudden, I wasn't being bullied anymore. But then I saw other people and I started standing up for them. And then by the time I got to college, I joined a fraternity where they were getting bullied. And I'd be standing up for them, fighting for them. So I never really stopped fighting. And this was physical fighting.
Do you think that's what led you to your law career?
I wanted to be a lawyer ever since reading a book about John Peter Zenger.
Oh.
Who was a publisher in White Plains, New York, who got arrested by no relation, the governor, Bill Cosby, British governor, about saying bad things about the governor. And libel, truth wasn't a defense to libel. They had a trial. The famous attorneys were not in New York back then, like you guys. They were in Philadelphia. And Andrew Hamilton came to defend him. And I read that book and I just fell in love with how someone can use words to stop injustice.
How old were you when you read that book?
And I was in 7th grade. So I was 13, 14, and it was just an amazing thing. But then soon after I learned that you need to be rich to be an attorney, and we were very poor. So I wanted to be a journalist then because I couldn't be an attorney because I didn't have any money. So I wanted to be a journalist then. And then I put that on hold, but I still had this dream of being an attorney in the back of my mind. And that happened when I worked at Kutcher's Country Club in the Catskills. And I met an attorney who told me about these loans you could take out. And I'm like, oh, wow. And then I realized he's not even that smart. I may be able to do this. And I'm still in touch with him today. Yeah.
Hopefully he's not
I loved Kutcher's. I went to Kutcher's when I was little. We did like snow tubing and stuff like that there. It was so fun.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're not in business anymore.
So this is a real bank you'd be having you go to, not like some pawn shop, right? You're talking about like a real loan. You can go, you can get, pay for law school, and just you don't have to have the money for tuition.
Right when you're applying, they tell you about it. I think they were called Grant or Pell or something.
Oh, yeah, Pell grants.
Pell grants.
Yeah.
Oh, well, right now, if you have one,
$120,000 in loans.
Right now, if you have one, you could possibly get it wiped out.
You're right.
I thought they declared it. I think the Supreme Court declared it unconstitutional.
They used to be able to, but now not so much.
They're trying to get around it.
So you went to law school, graduated in 1995,
right?
And then
the best law. Not that many law schools can say that their president went to their law school, and Joe Biden went to Syracuse, just so you know. So
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, he went to Syracuse Law. He doesn't talk about it much for obvious reasons, but but he went to Syracuse Law School. I wrote an article that got me in a lot of trouble, but it did go viral of why we don't hire our Ivy League graduates from law schools, and it went viral. If you Google why I don't hire Ivy League graduates and put my name in, you'll see every newspaper covered that article.
There's a different work ethic. I think it's similar to like the immigrant work ethic where you have a different mentality. You have a different, something else that's driving you. And you can't say everybody's like that, but that's a good hint of how a person's going to be and how they're going to persevere.
So we have a law firm full of immigrants, and we loved when Hamilton came out because, everybody around the office said, immigrants, we get things done, which is a line.
We sure do.
And we have tons of immigrants in our office, people born in another country. And we have people in our office from all over the world. It's extremely diverse, which we love. We think it makes for better lawyering.
No, I agree. And I think we all strive for that.
Country?
My mom was from the former Soviet Union. It's Ukraine now.
So are my grandparents, all 8 sides.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. So it's real. Yeah, you have that's really where you came from. And Camila is Brazilian. So
amazing. Portuguese. I don't know any Portuguese.
And Brenda's from Long Island, so it's pretty much
the same thing.
Sorry, I speak more Portuguese than I do Long Island.
That's fair. Not many people know my language.
I can speak it. I just don't understand it.
It's a form of immigrant.
Yeah. Transplant.
I did do 23andMe, my DNA, and it does something that I don't know anyone else that has this on the family tree, which is kind of cool. It's 100% Russian.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So you've gotten confirmation because people have gotten surprised,
yes,
about
a lot of surprises. A lot of surprises.
And I was surprised when I got 82% Portuguese.
Wow.
So what's the other part?
Everything. You name it, I
everything.
have it.
Well, because everybody in South America may have Native American, right?
Native American, Black, Jewish.
It makes sense because you're coming in from Portugal, you're invading the Native Americans, you fall in love with them.
Adam, then you worked for 4 years at 2 different firms, but that really didn't capture your passion, what you wanted to do.
Oh, no, absolutely. I didn't have a job graduating in June until March of 1996. So I went a lot of months without a full-time job. I worked part-time jobs. I worked for developers, doing research assignments, law assignments, but I only wanted to do litigation and real estate law. And finally, when I got to Winsig, and we now represent Owen Winsig of Winsig & Winsig, I was able to do both. And because it was so small, I got to do the cases right away, and it was a phenomenal experience. But I got to the point where I needed to complete my Jedi training, my real estate learning. And I was looking for the best firm in New York for this one type of law we kept getting questions on, this landlord-tenant law. I learned title, I learned easement, I learned litigation, I learned how to do a closing, but I did not know landlord-tenant law, and that's a must for real estate. And this firm called Dan Finkelstein Bora, and I applied and I got the job.
L&T Court is very chaotic.
I never thought that.
No? You felt right at
I feel at home in chaos. I'm very focused. So chaos to me, I'm very pointed. If I'm walking into chaos, I'm saying, okay, how can I game this so I can utilize it to help my clients and try to make sure that they're winning their cases or settling them or getting their best thing. So I had a lot of fun in all the housing courts in all 5 boroughs, including Staten Island. I made moot court, and I was definitely the worst speaker in my program for a trial attorney. But I made moot court because I had the best brief by a lot. They grade your brief, and that counts when you try out for moot court. And Syracuse moot court is known nationwide. They are still today is still a top moot court program 30 years later. But I had the best brief, so the chance of me not getting on, I had to really bomb it. And I probably did bomb it, but not poorly enough not to get on. So I made the moot court team, and then Travis Lewin, this incredible trial professor, he just saw right away all the problems. So he sends me to a speech doctor, speech school, theater class. And I'm like, this is fabulous. All this extra learning I get to do. So instead of the attitude of, I'm not going to do this. He's trying to make me quit. And I don't think he was. He really wanted me to learn. And I just I had all this extra training. And plus I had to do all the moot court requirements and I got to do competitions.
Do you continue, or did you continue things like that after moot court and after law school?
I thought that I had become a good speaker. And then if you ever want to be humbled, go on TV. So I go on TV and they love the content. But one of the producers called me aside and said, listen, we want to have you on all the time, but you need media training. And media training is speech training. So I was eating my words. I was probably speaking too fast. And I had this thing called a New York accent. Even recent TV court appearances, I'm eating my words a little bit, where there was 10,000 comments, and it was about Donald Trump's lawsuit because I had beaten him in a lawsuit. So they wanted me on, killing him on CNN. And I didn't do that, of course. So they were unhappy with me, but they're trashing me, and then I'm not a natural. And I'm like, media training didn't work. So, but media training went on for years too. So you figure by now that I'd be phenomenal at speaking at this point. It's still not, but it's really great in front of judges and juries.
Yeah, I was going to say your litigation experience has to be contributing to your media training and your eloquency.
But the problem is I'm still not a phenomenal speaker, which works out because the judges don't want you to speak perfectly. They want you to be real. They want you to sound like them, and the juries want you to sound like one of them. So you don't want to speak perfectly.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than talking, in the news or talk to the general public. It's a different talk, but it helps, I think.
So no one's ever heard me curse at my firm or outside my firm. I don't curse because just in case I'm ever in front of a judge or a jury, I just got to always be ready because you're anxiety ridden or anything could come out. So I just made it a pattern 23 years ago that I'm not going to curse, and I haven't cursed since.
Do you have a swear jar in the office in case one slips out?
Nothing could slip out because I haven't done it in so many years.
All right. I'm going to test you.
Yeah.
You're going to try and get him to curse on
I'm
the
worried
podcast.
now.
Not that I haven't gotten myself in trouble, but being
But not for cursing.
no. But when you're creating a high profile, which a lot of it you're making yourself,
Your brand.
and you're getting that high, everyone's trying to take you down.
Right.
And then when you're finding things that are hurting a lot of people and you're helping hundreds of thousands of people, but you're hurting the few that are very powerful, you got to be ready to take the punches.
Yeah, I mean,
take them hard.
Targets on your back, right?
Targets on your back, and they're coming after you. And the good news is, if you have nothing to lose, and the less you have to lose, the less fear you have. So bring it on. And that was a problem the adversaries had in trying to take me down.
Did that get easier when you formed your own law firm? You're building this brand, and now you don't have really anybody to hold you accountable but yourself. So you can put out what you want to put out.
Even at the firm, I was already building the brand, and I always wanted to please my bosses a lot. But firm number one, they will tell you I took them to a new level. Firm number two, they probably didn't know what to do with me. And then by the time I started my own firm, it was a hurricane.
Yeah.
It was definitely a hurricane.
And I think it was interesting how you transitioned to your own firm.
I had a case in White Plains, and the adversary drove me back to the city, and in exchange for working on a certain client, the Podolsky family, who is still in business, great family, I would do their work in exchange for free rent.
Nice.
Now, they had the better deal by far, but being offered free rent and free offices and a part-time receptionist, all I needed was a laptop and a phone. And that is phenomenal. And I was very happy at the firm, but I wanted to decide if the cases would settle. These are dumb things to leave a firm for. I wanted to decide when the cases would settle. I wanted to take cases to trial. I didn't like...
You wanted to be the decision maker.
Exactly. That's it.
Yeah,
You said it much better than me.
Yeah.
You don't need media training.
Thank
So-
you. This podcast has given me media training.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So I just decided to go for it on my own, never having a dream to do that.
But you were taking on different clients, I assume, while you were not taking care of that family.
So, I never stole any clients. And, I always figured that when I went to my own firm, clients would follow, except I never thought how they would follow. There's no internet. There's no...
You didn't leave breadcrumbs?
There's no way to get my number.
The yellow pages.
There's no cell phone. I'm not in the elevator. So how would they follow me? It was impossible. I never thought this out. So how was I going to get clients? The clients came right away, though, because I had a very low rate and I was very aggressive. And so, people would watch me in court and then start asking me as I'm walking out with my card. And then because I was so inexpensive, they were literally lining up outside. And I was like, okay, we got to figure something out here, because I had no idea how to run a business. And then...
Real estate is a niche that you have. You know it very well. But litigation can be applied to so many other topics. Why is it that you put yourself in that box?
So I did litigation in the morning at the beginning and closings in the afternoon. And a judge I'm not going to name, who's a friend of mine, said, Adam, I met a lot of people like you that go on their own and they wind up being closing attorneys and they quit litigation. And I said, oh, that's funny, Judge, because I always thought I'd do the opposite. I figured I'd do more litigation because I like it so much versus closings. It doesn't give me as much satisfaction. And then the litigation did take off and the closings were there. But when I hired more people, I would still do more litigation. And then I had someone else doing the closing.
Because that's where your talents lie. And that's what you like to do.
For all the young people listening, out of the millions of people listening right now, 2 things you need to do when you're figuring out what you want to do. And number 1, you got to love what you're doing. And number 2, you need to be good at it. And if you have that going on, everything else usually works out.
I think that's great advice.
Great advice.
It's a buy low, sell high. Greatest advice I've ever gotten.
So what type of real estate litigation were you doing when you first started, and how has that evolved over time?
The initial litigation was the bartering, and they had a lot of environmental control board and fire violations. So like on 9/11, when the judge kicked us out of the criminal court for fire violations, he said, there's a terrorist attack. You walk outside and the second plane hit.
Wow.
After the first plane, we went inside with the first plane. I mean, the plane hitting the World Trade Center is not stopping me from going to court. So, because
that should be your tagline.
Right.
Abnormal people do abnormal things. So I was treating ECB court, Environmental Control Board court, like it was federal court. So what happened was I used to spend hours and hours at the environmental control board because they kept putting my files underneath because no one wanted to take my cases. And then I realized that I had to complain because this was not fair. And then, I couldn't spend the whole day there. And then we figured out a system, which was dismiss my cases and we don't have to have this problem.
I know that one of the things that you would work on in the financial crisis, which is, I guess, several years, almost a decade after you started your firm, is the Interstate Land Full Disclosure Act, which you utilize, I think, for the first time in helping condo unit purchasers close their transactions, which they couldn't do because of the crisis. I don't know if you want to talk about that period. And I think you were assisting lots and lots of purchasers in resolving those issues.
ILSA, Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. It was invented in actually 1968 for places like Oklahoma and places where for buildings over 100 units, they didn't want elderly people or people that were not so sophisticated being taken advantage of. So they required certain forms to be given out if you're building a building over 100 units. Now, no one in New York, except for one developer, actually gave out those forms. And even that one developer didn't do it perfectly right. They were perfectly right, as we said. So every building in New York, we were suing. Or if we weren't suing, we were negotiating with, because we somehow managed to rope in groups of people. I don't know how we did this, but we kept track of every building and the groups of people had hired us. And believe it or not, we weren't there to get them out of their contract. We were there to take the closing files from whoever the closing attorney was, so we would have the ability to negotiate properly. What we really did was we actually helped the economy, and the developers appreciated it, most of them. Some hate my guts, but most of them hired me later on. And I'll go. At that time, we didn't represent developers. But by getting 40% off, what we did was that's what the lenders needed because they no longer could lend the same amount of money. Because 2008 was a really bad year for lending. I don't know if you guys know about that, but I'm kidding around.
Who knew?
So 2007, 2008 was this crisis, this bad recession. So the prices had to be dropped. And the developers needed an excuse because in the offering plan, they couldn't really change. And this is your area. This is what you guys do for a living. So the offering plan couldn't be changed. So they needed an extracurricular excuse that was exigent. And the reason was they didn't follow this law. So they were able to file an amendment plan, give them 40% off, sometimes 50, sometimes 35. And then the lenders were able to lend, the developers were able to close, and our clients were extremely happy. Very few people actually got out of their contracts. Some did. Some got out of their contracts. So the ones that got out of the contract, some of them were the 20 million, 30 million, and they lost their jobs at Goldman Sachs or whatever investment bank. And they really did get out of their contracts. But most of the people, we were really just there to get the money off. So I don't feel bad about what I did. But the Second Circuit Court of Appeals said, Adam Leitman Bailey firm, you are right on the law. You should win this case against this developer. And we won maybe over 100 cases. If they went to verdict, I don't know how many went to verdict. But one case was appealed. We won a trial. They went to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals and we lost. And what the court said was, you were right on the merits, but our understanding, and Revenue put a brief in against us, the Real Estate Board in New York, saying that this would destroy New York if you rule this way, the way that business is done in New York, which I thought was quite an exaggeration. And they said, we don't want to ruin the economy in New York because of a law. So we're going to have to rule against you on this, although we think you're right on the merits. And if you read the decision, it just says this. And Judge Costello's reversed. He very rarely reversed. But the law is repealed, so it no longer applies to condos and co-ops, so it doesn't affect us anymore. But it just shows you, for the younger attorneys out there, or even the older attorneys, never give up. Dig in, try to find something that helps you, and fight for your client's rights. It's always creativity. Every day we're coming up with something creative to help clients that many people have never thought of. We don't just rest on our laurels or what happened in the past. We're following every case coming down. We're looking for that edge, and we're looking for a way to help our clients that hasn't happened in the past. In that case you mentioned is an example of that.
You try to take something that you found and apply it, even if it's for the first time, and make the argument. And more often than not, you're successful and everybody's left in the dust because that just came out of nowhere. And you look under every rock, every stone for an argument that nobody's thought of. And then it's a winner.
That creativity and that drive and ambition and due diligence that you put into your work clearly shows because you have those favorable outcomes.
Not to mention reinventing yourself every time.
You were a one-man shop for a while. How long did that last?
It was until this incredible judge said, Adam, can you stay after? And I had 18 cases on that day. And I defaulted on a case for the first time in my life, meaning I checked in, but I didn't check back in before 1:00. She said, Adam, can you come up to the bar? I came up to the bar. And remember, housing court, they treat you really like a family. She says, Adam, you need an associate. You have to hire an associate. You have too many cases on. You can't do them all by yourself. And I said, you know what? That's great advice. I'm going to actually hire an associate. Next day, put an ad in and we hired our first associate and we kept hiring more and more and more. And I needed like 5 or 6 at the time, but I never had run a business. My parents are both teachers. My grandmother was a secretary of the Board of Education. Her husband, drove a taxi. So we didn't have, I'm the first business person in my family history. I have Ancestry.com also.
It's 100% Russian, no business.
Right.
In Russia, they were in the garment industry, but no one's making billions of dollars. There's very few people that could give me business advice. So that was difficult. Running a law firm is extremely difficult and easy at the same time, depending on who you hire. Alvin's very lucky as you guys.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks.
I'm so thankful for the attorneys that we have. And I know Alvin's very thankful as you.
He definitely is.
Yeah. Telling him that and ask for more money.
As the firm grows and you bring on new people, are your practice areas expanding?
No, we only do real estate. We are expanded in the sense that we now are doing zoning. And we're expanding in ways where we're adding to our litigation department by being more knowledgeable. So zoning was a big deal. Stuart Klein is a master of zoning and he's there. Stephen Wagner helps because he's just a genius in what he does. What we're missing that I'm looking for, I would like to do tax certiorari, but we haven't found that yet. And we can't do complex foreclosures. We have a huge foreclosure practice. Jackie Weinstein leads it. It has 7 attorneys in it. Can represent many of the servicers and banks that you've heard of. However, we have to turn down some of the larger foreclosures, commercial foreclosures, because we don't have enough people to handle them. So that would mean we would have to double or triple the size of our firm, which we're not interested in. So we'll take the residential and small building foreclosures. We'll keep going with that. But I wouldn't mind having more of a transactional practice.
But you do have some transactional.
It's mom and pop closings and small time leases and small time building.
And all the associates and partners do litigation one way or the other, or
no, the transactional partners do transactional, litigators do litigation. It's very hard to do both.
Yeah, unfortunately,
David does both.
David does it all.
I did both a long time ago. Now I'm just doing one.
Yeah, it's very difficult, as you know. Yeah,
you represented maybe more than one client when letters were sent up by the Department of Finance regarding eligibility, and there was this one Bronx developer that had this issue that there was some paperwork, that documentation that hadn't been properly filed.
Right.
And I think you took the applicant through that process and ensuring that they get their benefits.
People were coming in with the same problem. They weren't getting a clear letter of their eligibility for these benefits, which they had a right to. Second problem was the government wasn't informing everybody, which they were required to do pursuant to the law. But you know this better than me. This is more your area. So we came in and we sued. Everyone now gets proper notice. The notice is in Spanish and English. The notice is clear. It tells you your rights, and all the buildings are supposed to get it, actually get the benefits. And what we worked on with conjunction with that was we try to get it to them automatically where they don't have to apply for it, because they have the actual ability to give every building the credit. They know who they tax. Mm-hmm. So why don't you just give it to them if they have a right to it? Why do they have to apply for it? So you could save money for the ones that forget? It doesn't make any sense.
There were some J51 cases that you had worked on as well. And there were building owners who were targeted in connection with the exemption. They were double dipping in some way. They were deregulating while also obtaining that exemption. And there was a Court of Appeals decision in a case called Roberts versus Tishman Speyer that they weren't following. And you were assisting to try to unravel that and help them through that process.
Okay, imagine that a landlord-tenant firm represents one party in the sale of a building or buildings called Stuytown. And they've been evicting tenants from those buildings for 20 years, this law firm. And they do such a great job of evictions that they get DHCR to approve where they could use a thumb to get into the unit. So they really could track who's really living there, because the rules require that you be a primary resident and not illegally subletting and not be a nuisance, et cetera, to be rent regulated. And these units are rent regulated. So this law firm for 20 years is trying to evict everyone they can, starting even frivolous cases. Now, how can they start a frivolous case? Because in these leases, there's no attorney fees provision. So if they start it and they lose, they don't have to pay attorney fees. So they do this for 20 years, or approximately 20 years. And then gets better. And then they represent the buyer of all these buildings. And they write a memo saying it's a good deal. You could get plenty of evictions. I'll never understand this. Okay. And then the same law firm says, you know what, buyer, it's a good deal. You could get a lot of evictions, even though there's only breadcrumbs left. Obviously, I'm not going to name the law firm because I don't badmouth other law firms. But this same law firm then, besides saying it's a good deal to buy the Stuytown buildings, MetLife is a seller. they go ahead and say there's this division of housing community rule that regulates the rent-regulated tenancies. And they say, here's a memo here that says you have a J51 rent abatement still going on that applies. So all the evictions we did are valid because of this J51 abatement. And the reason I know they're valid and legal is because DHR put down a memo saying they were. Now, my law firm at the same time, besides being involved in several ways, is saying, do not rely on a DHR memo. And we're doing this in writing because DHR memo is not conclusive. It could be overturned by law. And there's way too much money involved to rely on that. There's billions of dollars involved. You can't rely on that. And we're telling our biggest clients, by this time representing many developers also, I said, we cannot rely on that. So it turns out Court of Appeals said the DHR memo was invalid. It turns out that there was only breadcrumbs. There wasn't a lot of tenants to evict anyway. And the deal was the biggest fiasco in the history of New York for a buyer. Tishman Speyer buys it. And it was a bidding war and everybody was bidding billions of dollars. And they bought nothing. They made a horrible deal. But I blame the law firm.
Did that lead you to your involvement in the DHCR deregulation cases or?
The deregulation cases where we're doing now, representing when we have so many big ones, because of the J51, 421 AKK cases, and we're on where if we lose, we have to give back the keys to the buildings. They're that big. They're that important. Those came from clients that we've been representing for many years, a lot of them 2 decades, and they just have another case and they want to use the same attorney. Others are referrals because they know we've had 20 of these cases or 30 of these cases, and we've won a few of them, or we've settled them very cheaply. And a lot of them you have to be really good at math.
You have to be looking at all the records for years and years, right?
Well, then the Regina case came out, a case that limits it to 4 years, but then there's exceptions to that.
Yeah.
So you go back and forth. It's like on a seesaw.
It could be like 8 to 10, right? Even though the 4 is really...
Well, it depends on what the latest case. Now it's back to 4, unless you could find real fraud and then they can go back forever. It's very hard to find a landlord that's committing real fraud, like really hid something or wrote themselves their own checks or really committed fraud. I mean, it happens, but it's very rare.
So you have these plaintiffs firms that gather the tenants or a group of tenants and then bring a lawsuit for back rent.
It's not usually the firms gathering the tenants. There's a group, this advocacy group, and they've lost tons of cases and they keep trying new theories. Their newest one is starting brokerage cases where they've sued all the brokerage companies. They hired testers and they tested them of whether they take Section 8 benefits. So that's the new one. But these J51 cases are taking years and years and years. The Court of Appeals comes out with a decision and then the appellate division doesn't follow them. So they need the court to go back to the Court of Appeals to reissue the same decision saying we really meant what we said.
Yeah.
We really said what we meant. We meant what we said. So meanwhile, the law firms are working in contingencies and they're not making any money, except for the few cases that they settle, but not enough to live off of. And there's only 3 or 4 law firms that are doing all these cases. We don't do the tenant side of this. We only do the landlord side of this. Because I can't take cases that I'm morally against. I just can't live with. But I don't think it's fair to go after landlords that did everything they can to file properly and are still being abused. These landlords seeking advice from firms like yours and filing the right amendments, and they did everything they could do it right. And going after them and then claiming they committed fraud, there's no fraud there.
What we found a lot of times is they have either a managing agent or somebody internally that fills this stuff out. And we obviously look at the initial ones if they're clients of ours, but the subsequent ones, they're just doing it yearly. And they have these agents or management companies doing it. And then mistakes happen and, it's math. So then it just sort of compounds over the years and it becomes a problem. And you're right, you have to be really good at math. You have to have spreadsheets because you have to track years and what increases are permitted. And then after 2019, it's become a totally different ballgame because the rules changed. So you have to be cognizant of that as well. Did you see any activity as a result or post those changes to the rent laws going into effect in 2019?
The June 14, 2019 changed my world. Imagine having a practice where you're the most aggressive law firm in New York, definitely most aggressive landlord-tenant practice in New York. And there are firms that only hire you to do the most difficult cases where you evict people for non-primary residence, illegal sublet, nuisance, having a dog, etc. And all of a sudden, rent regulation has changed and you no longer get a benefit for evicting rent-regulated tenants. There's no benefit. You can't increase the rent if you evict them. In 24 hours, we are no longer needed by hundreds of clients, maybe thousands of clients. We probably have 10,000 active clients and all of a sudden we're no longer needed. So that's a crushing blow. Somehow, I don't understand how we're busier than ever. Imagine how many union and non-union laborers don't have work to do because no landlords no longer need to hire them to substantially rehabilitate buildings or redo apartments after a tenant leaves. Imagine how many jobs are lost there. We represent landlords and tenants. The amount of tenants that call me asking for a buyout, that they want to buy out, and I tell them that landlords are going to only offer them $10,000, where 4 years ago they would have gotten hundreds of thousands of dollars, and their dream was always to turn a certain age and then move to Florida. And they no longer can do that because the state legislature decided to play God. It's just a really, really horrible thing. Rent regulation is a really, really bad law. It was created during World War II. It's not a fair form of low-income housing. The reason is that it gives you housing based on when you moved in an apartment on a certain date, not based on how low income is determined now in newer buildings, where it's an 80-20 building. You have to apply for the housing, and it's given based on financial need, and a lot of preference goes to people that are public servants or help people like nurses, firemen, police officers, and teachers. So that's a great system where we're giving low income or median income or middle income homes to people that really need them. With rent regulation, you just get lucky enough to move into an apartment that's a certain amount of units on a certain date. And then now many of those people are extremely wealthy. We know many, many examples of people that are extremely wealthy living in these apartments, and they're funding the politicians to keep those laws in place. They just don't belong there. It's anti-democratic. It's socialistic, but it's not just socialistic. It's corrupt socialism because you're helping people that don't need the help instead of helping poor people.
So your thoughts of good cause eviction, which is essentially rent regulation for everybody. This may make you curse, by the way. I can see it.
Cursing will never happen. But yeah.
If you think that rent stabilization is difficult on you, what are your thoughts on good cause eviction?
It's just, how much does our state legislature hate New York? How much do we hate our landlords and developers?
Seems like a lot, I'll tell you.
A lot. I mean, I was in Florida and I got a tour by a developer of West Palm Beach area, and they rolled out the red carpet. They're doing everything they can to, even the signs are saying, welcome real estate, welcome developers, welcome everyone. And in New York, they're doing everything they can to say, I hate you. Stop building. Stop trying to make your buildings nice. Stop trying to make this a place where a good place to live. They're doing the opposite. The good cause eviction
why do you think that is? What's the reasoning behind it?
I think it just goes to a core of, we want all housing to be free and you should give back the keys. I'm not exaggerating this. You should give back the keys and start over because we want to ruin you because rent is so high. And they don't realize that if you make rent free market, all the apartments became free market, then what happens if hundreds of thousands of apartments go on the market that are free market? And rent regulation, we can move apartments and buy people out and make them free market. What happens? You can have more inventory on the market. What happens? You have more of something, the prices will go down. And then either they're not understanding the economics because the rent's too damn high.
Amen.
Yeah.
So the rent's too high. So that means we don't have enough inventory. And the way to get rid of that is, don't even think of a good cause eviction problem, because that's not going to help things. That's going to keep people frozen in their apartments. And, we don't want to add to our regulation. We want to lessen it. And we want to have as many free market apartments as possible, so rents go lower. So we want to attract the best talent. And the lower the rent, the better talent we're going to attract. Instead of hearing more and more people moving to Florida or California and other places, it's just ridiculous. It's amazing that we retain this many people.
Surprised myself, but everybody seems to have love New York. I'm a New Yorker. People don't want to leave this place. Even the developers say, well, we'll go away someplace else. Hopefully the environment will be a bit better. Is there anything that you've done either with Rebney, with your firm, lobbyists, anything that you've done to be outspoken about the situation and your thoughts about it to try to convince the legislature to change things?
We do several things. We are Dub Tryman's at our firm. He's written 96 books on landlord-tenant law. We know by name every state senator and assemblyman. And we're in touch with many of them. I'm so friendly, even have dinner with the ones that are completely in left field. But when they call me for money, I said to one who now became a judge, he quit because he wanted to be closer to home with his 2 kids who go to public school here. But he asked me for money. I said, the only way I'm going to get you money is if to get all the people that hate you so much to donate. So you get you out of this office, because he was running for attorney general, to get you out of this office to get into that office. He goes, okay, great idea. I'm thinking, but one of the things we're forgetting is worse than rent regulation and those laws they passed. What was worse in 2019 was the criminal laws, the pro-criminal laws, the no cash bail, not keeping people that allegedly raped someone were not kept on bail. People that were in jail or convicted of crime were not kept on bail and let out in the streets and committed other crimes. This was going on, and I know they're changing the laws now, but this was going on and all over New York. So if you really want to hurt real estate the most, it's not around regulation. It's allowing crime to be on the streets. So every time you hear someone push someone in the middle of a subway or people getting murdered, that's going to hurt real estate more than rent regulation.
Yeah. What you're saying is correct. That really does hurt real estate. And I think I've seen newspaper articles about that specifically to try to make it a pain point. Do you think there's anything that the public, our millions and millions of listeners,
Skyliners,
Skyliners, to try to convince? Who are these people that can be convinced, if anything?
So there are a lot of moderates. We only have one party, and it's the Democratic Party. So I'm a registered Democrat, even though a registered Democrat looks much different than it did when I first became a registered Democrat.
Yeah. So what flavor of Democrat are you?
What flavor, exactly. So there are many moderate Democrats, and you have to find them. And you're really not going to get your ideal wish. It's getting the best case you can get. And that's the reality going on. I almost never network. I don't do dinners. I don't go out much. I am a member of REBD. I am a member of CHIP. I do go to certain functions, but I almost never network. But I am in touch with politics. I am in touch. We will be quick to write laws if it's helpful. We'll do a counter law, but we are in touch with the legislatures to give them, here's what's really going on. And because they want money from us and they've gotten it in the past, they will take our calls. Remember, they're voting on certain things, and you have to understand some basics. Let's take the foreclosure laws they're passing. We have foreclosure cases in multiple numbers against many of the assemblymen and senators that are in office. We have actual cases against them.
Interesting.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
So they're trying to pass a foreclosure law that's retroactive, that helps themselves out because they're on foreclosure. Well, if you're on foreclosure, or there's many others that aren't paying their rent and many others that are unregulated tenants. So why would they ever be in favor of getting rid of rent regulation or helping the foreclosure process to go faster when they're conflicted out because they're in foreclosure or they're in a rent regulated apartment and they're having trouble paying their rent?
Yeah.
Why would they be helpful? Think about the reality of it. We need a strong Republican leader in New York City. And it did start working when Giuliani was in office. The other Rudy Giuliani, not the person that exists today.
I assume you meant
the real one. Right. The hero of the 9/11. When he was running for mayor, the Republican Party had a groundswell. And you need to start when they're really young, when they're teenagers on up, and in their 20s, start picking them out and having them start running for local offices. And same as like how Acorn, which turned into this, because I don't think that the average person in these communities supports the socialists, communists. I think that if you get two parties running against each other, it's going to cause both of them come to the middle. Just having two parties in itself, the way that Thomas Jefferson envisioned our democracy and Alexander Hamilton, is we have two parties running against each other. That will cause both of them to compromise in their issues a little bit.
You should hope so.
But those things that we may not like about the federal government, guns, which New York ignores the federal government anyway, and abortion, and these aren't state issues that we have to worry about here. We can focus on crime and real estate and taxes and how to make this a better city. These are things that everybody should be agreeing upon.
What trends are you seeing now in terms of the issues in real estate, aside from the ones that we talked about, if there are any? Something that, cases that you're seeing that we're not necessarily seeing yet because you're doing, your diligence, you're interviewing clients. Are there any sort of trends you're seeing right now?
In what part of real estate?
It could be
we
really
have a lot of cases going on.
It could be, it could be. If you could focus on development, that's fine. But if you have some interesting tidbits about like trends that are happening, whether they're foreclosures, whether evictions, whatever they are.
We have a tsunami about to happen or happening. The commercial landlords cannot pay their rent. Light leases are not being signed. If they are being signed, they're much smaller leases being signed. So the banks are not allowing us to foreclose because they don't know if there's going to be a buyer at the end, even for the smaller ones. Okay. So we have a problem with large buildings which we're not allowed to do those cases, but we are hired for the evictions. So we're a part of it anyway. So we have the large buildings, which are in real deep problems if they have mortgages. Then you have retail. Why do you need retail stores when you don't need to wear suits anymore? You don't need to buy shoes anymore. You don't need to dress up anymore. And everything you want to buy, you could buy on Amazon. So there's less need for retail. So they're having their own problems. Then you have multifamily housing. In 2019, when they scrapped the reason for evicting someone who's violating the rent stabilization laws, those people had loans, and those loans were based on evicting people or buying them out. And they are having trouble paying back those loans. So you have several areas where it should cause a problem in our economy, and it should keep foreclosure lawyers very busy, and it should cause the change. They're going to have to sell their buildings. If they're smart, a lot of them have them on the market now privately, but they're going to have to sell their buildings, be foreclosed on, or it's going to be a different New York. A lot of them are trying to convert from commercial to residential. Is this stuff you already know? Or
we know of it, but we don't have firsthand.
All right, so this is actually going on. And another thing is going on is with evictions, we start an eviction action. We do a lot of commercial evictions. And instead of evicting, a lot of times we're coming into a new lease or new payment plan because we're worried we don't know the next person to take over the store will actually be there to take over.
Right.
Because the person's other stores aren't doing as well. So our economy is in a complete mess in New York. Now, I don't know about nationwide, but when I read about San Francisco, well, San Francisco is also regulated, so they're going to have the same mess. I know our state senators and state assembly went to Israel to go look at that. They should actually go to San Francisco to look at how well their policies are doing. They should be required to go there, but they won't do that. They don't want to look at the horror of themselves. So the good news for brokers is there'll be a lot of change, and brokers don't really care about how high or low the market is. They care about change. The lawyers as well. There'll be more sales. There'll be more, if there's not foreclosures, there'll be workouts. So lawyers will be busy. Some lawyers won't be, but it's like you may not have as many movie theaters anymore, but you do have Netflix and this and that. So things are going to be changing in what we're doing. They gave us a bone with Gowanus. Gowanus is one area that needs to really be developed. That's the start. But, why not have, when the city is a mess right now and we're about to have a cyclone, a tsunami happen to us, why not have incentives?
Yeah.
Let's help New York. Throw us a bone.
I think maybe they're counting on things getting bad so that they can get their way. It's a negotiation tactic, right?
But if things get really bad, doesn't that mean that they don't get reelected?
You would hope so, but I don't know if their constituents understand the issues well enough and why the consequences are happening to point the finger at them, because they're going to be pointing the finger at market rate developers, at, the city agencies, the governor.
And that's why we have this show, to educate everyone.
Exactly.
For the millions of listeners.
Our Skyliners are going to start writing in.
Adam, this is one of the reasons that we do have this show, so that we can have people talk about their experiences. It's not an article you're reading. You're doing this work. We're doing this work. Yeah. Others we've had on the show do this work. And we're also trying to break down stereotypes. Adam Leitman Bailey is an amazing, phenomenal attorney, but he's a nice guy. And he's also such a class act. You would not even know it just by hearing an argument, because sometimes I tremble just by thinking your name. So now I don't
so sorry.
I think for a litigator, it's a good thing. Doesn't mean you have to think that's your life. You're such, like I said, such a class act, such a nice guy.
Thank you.
And
personable, energetic.
Yeah. And we're hoping to break down those stereotypes. Adam, it's been a pleasure. But if there's something else that you want to mention, anything you want to plug,
why don't you tell everybody where they can find you on social media and how to contact you if they have any questions?
We are all over social media. I don't even know our taglines.
I think you have Twitter, right? It's probably
no. We have everything: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
It's X now, guys.
But it's not. I think it's ALB_PC. I think is the firm one. I don't know. We have a whole.
If you just Google your name,
Google his name and whatever social media you want,
and read his book. He has 2 books out. He has a kid's book out, and you have a book about residential sales, right?
Home has a great message. It's very nice.
How did you come up with the idea of doing a kid's book?
I wrote an article in the American Bar Association about it. It's funny because it's a lovely, happy book. It's really well done. It won 19 awards. And it's a dark, dark story about that you heard today. Because it's about a boy who wants a bigger apartment. You could tell it's a rent-regulated apartment in Queens. You could just tell by looking at the front page. And so his parents take him all over the world looking at different homes. Home. It's a real estate book, marketing real estate, get it? And then he has so much fun at all these homes all over the world. But at the end, he realizes that it's not about the home, but it's about who he lives with that counts, his family. And so he decides to stay in his small house. And I just ruined the ending for you.
Well,
love it.
It's a great message.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful one. You would sequel, you think? Or another one?
So the next
called
book,
Apartment.
The next book is, Real Estate Titles is Jim Pedowitz's book. We redid, we rewrote, redid, it's 2 volumes. It's every real estate attorney should have that. I don't know how you practice law without it. Everyone I know has that book. It's 2 volumes. It's a green book, thousands of pages. I wrote the chapters on adverse possession and easements. So I know a little bit about adverse possession.
How often does adverse possession come up nowadays? Really?
Well, we represent just about every title company. So we have a lot of adverse possession cases and easement cases.
We worked on an easement. I mean, you guys were obviously doing the litigation. Maybe we could do a children's book about a team up.
That was a real easement case. And actually, it was a very difficult case. We needed a miracle to happen, and we made it happen, and we just got it done.
Yeah. For marriage, sometimes don't always win the day. Sometimes you have to be practical and business oriented, and that's the best solution.
That was definitely a team effort. You guys did the deal, and we had to do the litigation, and it was you guys did a great job on the deal, and that was a mega deal. And we just had to do the litigation, which is the easier part.
The only disadvantage we had was time.
We appreciate your time here today.
This is a real honor. You guys are phenomenal attorneys and phenomenal law firm, and we love you guys.
Well, we appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah. We'll talk to you soon, and we can't wait till our audience hears this.
Till next time, Skyliners.
Yeah. See you later, Skyliner.
Well, everyone, that's our show. Thanks so much for listening.
And of course, don't forget to subscribe. Also, don't forget to leave comments, because we love to hear from our audience, right, Brenda?
Yeah, feel free to reach out at info@sideandshine.com or visit our website at sideandshine.com. We really look forward to hearing from you.
You could also reach out to David and Brenda at dshamshovich@sideandshine.com and Beaslakowski at sideandshine.com.
Those are lengthy last names. You can just find us on our website.
That's right.